right. I think we're very fortunate and pleased to have Carolyn Ludwig with us here today. Hopefully this is one of many times when she can actually come and present to us. We're very fortunate. She's local. She lives here in Colleyville, Texas. But let me just say a few words about Carolyn. She's an author, and what you're going to learn today is that during her travels in Egypt, she's been to Egypt, over 60 times? Amazing. Over the past 25 years, she has come to appreciate the very rich tradition of our Christian heritage. Its history, along with its threads and famous pharaonic past, things that we really take for granted. Carolyn was deeply moved by the humanity of the stories that were told to her and that she learned about over the years of the life of Christ and the Holy Family through their travels in Egypt and up through the Nile. She was very moved and humbled by the simplicity of Egypt, its early churches that was built brick by brick, and the colors mirroring the sands of our deserts. She was inspired and has visited many of the churches in Egypt and monasteries and those associated with the traditions of the Holy Family. So today she's going to be talking to you a little bit about these travels, since the time of Christ, and I hope that you learn to appreciate it. And if she has some time, would you be able to field some questions at the end?
I'll try to answer them.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's give a very, very nice welcome to Carolyn Ludwig.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Suzette for putting all of this together. And I know she's worked hard. It's always difficult when there are many people involved in anything like this. And she's been very, very helpful to me. And I think we've made a new friend, yeah. Well, today I'm trying to tell you about some of the sites where the Holy Family stayed and what happened in that site just because they passed by or drank from a well. I'm sure you know most of these stories, but it's very interesting that the Western Christians know nothing. They know nothing about what happened in Egypt and what your stories are. And that's one of the things, one of my passions, is to help the Western Christians learn about the Middle Eastern Christians that they know very little about. And that's where it all began, isn't it? And each one of the Orthodox churches will say, no, it started in Greece. No, it started in, but it doesn't really matter because I know it started in Egypt because that's where the Christ child walked, talked, and all the stories came from. And the Egyptians knew he was special, that he was something special. And they were oh so ready to get rid of the multiple God idea, and ready because they knew it was right. And so you're from that heritage. I think that's a very special heritage to come from. Not only is Egypt a very special place pharaonically, my goodness, all the temples and the history that was made there and kept there for you to pass on to your children and grandchildren. I know you think that's a long way away, but it's tomorrow. I know it's been that way for me. So let's get started. One of the first questions that's asked is that how did I get involved in Egypt, and how did my husband? My husband, Bruce Ludwig, was involved with an American Egyptologist, a famous one called Kent Weeks. He was at Stanford when my husband met him, and Kent was exploring the Valley of Kings, and he knew there was a tomb there someplace that was talked about in the books, had already been sort of discovered, but not opened up and really studied. Well, we were at an American University in Cairo Board of Trustee meeting, and my husband was on that board then, and Kent sent us an old-fashioned fax. You don't probably know what faxes are anymore, but an old-fashioned one that was shiny and purple writing. Bruce, get to Luxor right now. Come right now. And so we packed up when we got there, and Kent had found the largest tomb in the Valley of Kings ever, and it's the tomb of the sons of, I've forgotten the name already, the big king, Ramses. And Ramses, and so we were the first people with Kent to crawl in to that tomb. We had tomb dust all over us. Our daughter was the first woman to go in with Kent, and we had to crawl with our arms and like this, with hitting the hard hats on top. And then you got to the end where a great big boulder was, and then you could slide down the boulder like a slide, and there he was, Osiris, carved into the mountainside. It was very exciting at the time. We got to do a lot of things like that through the years. Another one is Mark Lehner. We got to be with Mark at the Sphinx. I got to crawl underneath the Sphinx with Zahi Oas laughing at me. And wonderful experiences. However, every once in a while, I would go into sites that we were walking through, churches, recognizing that somewhere someone had written a little pamphlet, or one of the priests had done a little book on the Holy Family staying there. I couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't believe that we didn't know these wonderful, wonderful stories. And that's how it all began in a way. And then one day, I had breast cancer twice. The first go-around, I had just finished my radiation, walking down the hallway, and so tired. I was finished with all of the chemo and everything, and all of a sudden, the Lord came to me and said, "Carolyn, show my homes in Los Angeles." And I thought, I said, "I don't know how to do that." He said, "Don't worry about it, just do it." My niece, my brother's daughter, came to visit me, and she was doing photography of bridal work, and she said, "Aunt Carolyn, I just got a job photographing architecture in Los Angeles, and I really liked it." And I said, "Aha, there's the next answer. The Lord opens the doors." And I said, "Come with me. We're going to do the churches of Los Angeles," and we did. Second go around, I get the book from Los Angeles in my garage, and I don't know how I'm going to sell the darn thing, but I had it in the garage. Then my daughter and I went to Rome, and in a dream, Mary comes. Mary says, "Carolyn, show our journey in Egypt." I sat straight up in bed. I said, to my daughter, "I know what the second book is going to be." She said, "You didn't sell the first one yet, Mother." I said, "I'm not worried about that one. I'm going to do the journey of the churches." And every time we had a problem, or a door was shut, another one was open, I always knew, no matter what the problem was, funny or hard, it would be taken care of, and it was. The photographer, Sharif Sonbal, he was another miracle, and it took us 5 years to do that book. Couldn't do it again today because we had so many nice contacts there in Egypt. And every time I'd walk into Zahi's office, I don't think very many of you know who he is. Yeah, you do. I'd walk in and he'd say, "What do you want, Carolyn?" And I would tell him, and he said, "Done." he was so good to us, and it never a penny passed over his desk. What a lovely friend. So that's my stories, although through all my childhood I've had miraculous things happen with the hand of the Lord on my shoulder. I knew it then, although I don't come from a religious family on my mother and father's sides. I just knew that the Lord's hand was on my shoulder, and that's how these books become what they are. So, let's talk about this heritage of yours. Dates back to the earliest days of Christianity and escaping the wrath of King Herod. And I know you know those stories, and that the journey was continued defining narrative for Egyptian Christians and an important part of culture for Christians and Muslims alike. There have been times I've been deeply moved by the humanity of the stories still told about the few years of the life of the Christ child, and by the tourists and Egyptians in the churches and the shrines dedicated to the memory of the Holy Family. I'm always touched by that, and have learned a great deal by this observation. So now we can begin the slides. I'm not showing you every picture in the book and every church. I'm going to show you the ones that I believe have been touched or passed by the family. And that, I think we'll start, this was in Alexandria. We start the slides. Are they on? No. There they are. Here we have our friend, the Sphinx. There's so much going on about that always, about somebody's hiding something underneath, and it's a secret. No, it's not true. I've been underneath it. You know, I got to go down underneath it. It's a big hole. It's squared off. They did find a tennis shoe from the 1930s. Yeah. Okay. We did have a great pleasure in meeting Pope Shenouda a few times, and we do have a photograph of presenting the book to His Holiness. But this was during his Jubilee in Cairo. We got scolded for a few things. And the man in the picture was the director of the... oh no, here we go. See, next. We want to go forward. Can you see that very well? It's a little dim, isn't it? I wonder if we turn off the lights in the sanctuary, if that would help. Is that a little better? Okay. Now, I want to clear something up, that in all of my books I have written something. Especially like Sharif Sonbol didn't want to shoot a few churches or a few things because he thought they were not attractive enough. Well, that's too bad. So I went behind his back and I photographed those places. And then we did find scholars with PhDs to write the histories, because that's very important, isn't it? And I didn't want anybody to question what we were doing. And that Gadet Gabra is probably the most famous one that writes Coptic history all the time. He has several books. Next. Now this is Pope Shenouda and myself and Mark Lintz, who has passed away, but he was the driving force with this, doing these books, the last two. An amazing man. Now this is the, now we're going to leave this one on there for a minute. The Coptic Patriarchal Church of St. Mark was built in 1819. And while we were doing this book, I was looking for the original ruins of St. Mark's schools. Right after the crucifixion, he came back to Egypt. He was Egyptian. His parents were wealthy farmers. And he came back to teach the Egyptians about the teachings of Christ. Well, nobody knew where his school was. And then one afternoon, after we were printed, one of the abunas said, well, that's underneath the Church of St. Mark. Have you been in there, Michael? The next time I go to Egypt, I want to go underneath there and see what's left. What is it about? I hope it's still there. I told you all that one day. Yeah. Okay, next. The interior, look at this. You can see the stairwell that's curved around. That's all marble. Quite beautiful. This entire place is really beautiful. And in the early days, the patriarchs lived there, and when they died there and are buried there. Next. Okay, it's hard to see in this this light, but this is the darkest part is the original part of the church, and the lightest part has been added on to make more room. But it's quite beautiful. It doesn't look that way when you look at it up from the outside. Okay, and then we'll skip through the book, and if you get a book, you can do this on your own. The Catholic and the Greek Orthodox, the Protestant churches that are in Egypt. I tried to show, because I thought the diversity would be important to the person who doesn't know Egypt. It's not all Coptic. Then we go to Wadi al-Naturn, where the monastery of the Syrians. It wasn't always it wasn't 100% Syrian. The Copts and the Syrians lived together, and they had I can switch it?
You can just...
By doing that? Okay.
So this way?
Thanks. See, I'm in power now. You can... Okay. The most famous person in this monastery was the abbot Moses of Nisbis, and he was Syrian. He refurbished the church and of the Holy Virgin and enriched the library with a large number of Syriac manuscripts. And he also commissioned famous doors. Well, this is going to be backwards. So these are the famous doors. Has anybody seen these before? Have you gone there to see them? Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they? It's so interesting to watch people photographing and studying and praying in front of them, and they are quite nice. Then they had a fire in the western part of the church, and the photograph on the right is a church that was built in the thousands, and it hadn't been changed at all. But the fire revealed in the half dome, there were 3 half domes, and the fire kind of melted the pastes that pasted the icons over the years that they had on top of each other. And so now there's 3 or 4 from each half dome. I haven't seen any work that's done to photograph them or talk about them, but that doesn't mean they haven't done it yet. But it's to say that the Church of the Holy Virgin is circa 600, and the picture on your left is a picture of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in paradise, and the small figures in their laps represent souls of the blessed eating the fruit from paradise. And this gets a little confusing because these three figures all look alike, and in the Ethiopian icons, they have the same figures without the little people on their laps, and they call them the Holy Trinity. They're not named Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in paradise. Okay, now here we go. We've already done the door. These are just some details of the door that you can see up closer. And the picture on the right is to the entrance to the southern altar room, above the entrance of the two equestrian saints. I like the equestrian saints the best. And left is the Virgin Mary enthroned with the child Jesus. Now we're going to Cairo. I've got, now this is the part that here we go. Now this is Old Cairo. Old Cairo has a long history of the Romans coming through and building all of this, all those, the wall that goes all the way around. It's like a sloppy square. And in that part where all those buildings are sitting was all water from the Nile. It was a harbor. Can you envision that? A harbor. The boats would come in off the Nile into one of the entrances, and basically on the corner, and unload all of their grains, their vegetables, fruits, and that would be sent via canal that they built on the opposite side, way over on that end, a canal wide enough for two large ships carrying all of those fruits and things, and probably cattle, off through the Mediterranean and delivering. It's amazing, isn't it? Now, after the Romans left, that canal wasn't tended to and kept clean, of course, and it got so rancid and full of mosquitoes that they had to fill it in. Too bad. But not too bad, because after the Romans left, the Christians swooped in and started their own buildings. It was just perfect. It was a fortress. So that's how that all began. And when I heard that, and it's in a book, he has it all drawn out. It's a fabulous story. Now this is up on the road. The road is way up high here, and you go down the steep stairs through this tunnel to access the level of where the churches are and where people are living. Well, I like this because it shows you just how high that was, and that was all filled with water. When we were there, just as this book was being just finished, hadn't been printed yet, there were a few countries of Egyptologists that were rerouting the streams in the water that was running under Old Cairo because it was keeping the churches wet and ruining the foundations. So as we were there and we made all the appointments in the world with all the letters. You have to have all these papers that you give 2 or 3 copies to each policeman, and so they don't want to get in trouble. And we got to go under the altar of Abu Sarga. Well, first of all, we go to the hanging church. The hanging church didn't have to worry about water because it is built over the fortress of the Romans, over one of the gates. And it's way up high, and there are places where you can walk through and see down through. It's kind of scary for those that are afraid of heights. So I like to take those people there first. And brighten their day up a little bit. Well, it used to be called the Church of Steps because you had to walk up to it. The hanging church is what it's known as now, but I think the hanging church doesn't make any sense unless you can see how it was built and what it's hanging over. It's a beautiful interior. Let's see now, what do I have? This is a contemporary piece that's on the walls as you're walking to the stairs to go upstairs. The interior. Now, for the old Cairo book, Sharif, he could be so mean, he made them move all of the seating and the carpets out so you could see the whole thing without anything on the floor. But what that revealed is the cutout for the trap door, that when there was a fire or they were being raided, the priests could grab all the icons they could and go down through there and hide and get out. So, and everybody wants to see that now because they know it's there. And it's a good idea to have it for safety's sake. For, fires are very bad. This church has beautiful Arabic artwork on the arches, you see. It's stunning inside, but all of these churches have been redone so many times because of fire and raiding. These are in the Ciboria, over the altar. They have a dome over each altar, and these are painted up inside. The book will show you in more detail, but they are exquisite. I always felt these should be done in some sort of needlepoint because they're so beautiful. Oh, and these are just visions of, you can see the ceiling a little bit better there. St. Mark. These look so much better in the book, I'm sorry. Now this is St. Barbara, just down the pathway, past the bookstores and the whatnots. And that, I just touched it. Can I make it go backwards? This is in neon. I think it's done so beautifully, and she has such a lovely face. I've never seen it at night. But this is their sister churches. They were built at the same time, or close to each other in time. And they were built by Athanasius, a scribe for Abd al-Aziz Marwan. And this was in the 685 to about 705. Athanasius of Edessa. He was taken by the Saint Sergius and Saint Bacchus when they were martyred, and that's why. And the daughter of Saint Barbara. Do you know the story of Saint Barbara, where her father was protecting her, built a tower with 2 windows? Is it? Oh, how nice. Today is also the 4th anniversary of our moving here to Colleyville from Los Angeles. 4 years ago today. It's a special day then. When her father heard she put the 3rd window up, then he turned her over and had her, and they martyred her. Oh, terrible. Daddy. Several pieces from the Church of St. Barbara are in the Coptic Museum. This is one of the icons. This shows the 16 feasts, and it was all in one great big long piece of a beam, and they divided it into so that they could put it up on one wall, and you could see it all together. It is quite amazing. Am I going? Are you okay? Are you bored? Do you want to ask questions yet? I'm almost finished. Here's Saint the Bacchus. Okay, now I'm gonna have to do two things. This is the church where the crypt is, where the crypt that the family stayed. The Holy Family stayed there for quite a few months. And of course, the church wasn't there then. It was just a cave dug down into the soft sand, and it was like a motel. They had several of these around, and when you were traveling, you could go in and pay somebody to stay there. So this is the place that had been drained, and we had about 19 people from all different places of the government and antiquities people to go down there because they hadn't been in there yet. And we were all very excited, but they felt they had to be there to go with us, to escort us. Well, we got there and we were all waiting, and the priest at the moment said no, he wasn't going to let us go in there after all. But we got in. It was one of those doors, It took about 2 seconds. The crypt was like so then this is a detail of the screen there. It's carved beautifully, very nicely. And here we are, come on, down inside that crypt. Now, it's been reorganized. Evidently, there were some Jesuits there for a while, and they must have put those columns in. And then they're not there anymore, of course. But when we got in there, the floor was still wet. And all these nice big squares on the floor looked like they were pieces that might have been taken from another temple, a pharaonic temple. And then Sharif went back after we finished, just days after, and the priest had put white tiles down all over those stones. And we were so, well, I stirred the pot a little. And that's the way it had to stay. It was not the priest, it was the director of antiquities in Old Cairo who happened to be not Christian. So I couldn't get it changed. But he did say, "Oh, you're the lady that got me in trouble." I said, "Yes, I am." And so, but it didn't change, which is really too bad, because I felt those are stones that probably the Holy Family stepped on, for heaven's sakes. That's probably why he did it. Okay. Then we can go into the Greek Orthodox Church, which is quite something. It's really beautiful. It's done in the round. But I'm not going to take you there today. I'm going to take you to this one. This is the Sleeping Mary Church, or the Church of Dormition. And you go in here, and this is a nice icon. It's a piece of furniture with the angels, and it looks like Christ in the back, waiting for his mother, the Virgin Mary, and then laying down in like a little bed. She's still sleeping. And then you can walk back to the back of the church, and there is a well. You know, when Christ would... I didn't touch it. When Mary was thirsty and she said to Jesus, "I'm thirsty," he would raise a well for her and say that whoever shall believe will be blessed, and so there are many wells across Egypt in different sites. Usually churches or monasteries are built around them. That's what the well is. And I tell everybody to empty their bottles of plastic bottles, and we can take that well water, but I don't think you should drink it. Some did, though. It was pretty funny. And on the right-hand side is another crypt. And this is a crypt where they supposedly stayed on their way out of Egypt, coming back. It's all very touching, especially to the Western Christians, to go through. I can go through a couple of other spots, but I think that's long enough for you, because you've been here all day, haven't you? So that's through Old Cairo. There are more in Egypt, but you have to read the book to find out where they are. Will you do that? And you can come back and you can tell me the story. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Okay, you have, I think, 2 books, right? Or do you have more than 2?
I have published, I published the books. And the ladies will maybe understand this better than the men, but when I heard my husband helped several photographers, scientists, do their own books, and he would help them with publishers. And once the publisher got a hold of these books, those books became something other than what the scientist or the photographer wanted it to be. And there was no arguing with them. So I decided to start my own publishing company so nobody could tell me what to do. Are you surprised? And it worked. It really did. And then we were in co-publishing the second, third, and fourth book with AUC Press. And that's been a pleasure. But that's whole nother story, but I still get my way most of the time.
So did you stay in Egypt for a long period of time to come up with those beautiful books? It's a lot of effort put into these books.
Well, Sharif Sonbol lives in Cairo, and he's the photographer, and he's a very clever guy and very talented in his photography. We would be online and emailing back and forth a lot. But yes, I did go and stay a month at a time, and I had a driver and Sharif, and then another fellow that would help Sharif with the camera equipment and that kind of thing, and me. And Sharif would take me by the shoulders and tell me who to give money to. And actually, we really didn't have very much trouble at all. But then we had letters from the Department of Antiquities from Zahi, and we had all the right papers because we knew everybody. But today, with all the differences that are going on, I don't think that this could be done. So we're very grateful for the timing of it all. But I do have the churches of Egypt, and then the next one is Old Cairo. I don't know if you have any of those, Suzette.
I think we have several of these, but we don't have one.
Oh, is that right? Well, I might have 1 or 2 more in the car. They do have the Old Cairo in softbound, but I didn't have anything to do with choosing that color. AUC did it. I don't like the color they chose. And then the fourth book that we just published, is about Ethiopia, the churches of Ethiopia, and that's over 500 pages. And that weighs about 10 pounds.
Did you cover the various monasteries of Egypt? I mean, you can have a book on that separately.
We have some of the monasteries, and the most important one where it was the last time Christ came with Mary and commissioned just for us. Oh, can you open? Thank you. We commissioned these maps, and any of the artwork is ours that we commissioned. And if you have a key or something, it'll do it. Now, what's so funny? Yeah, that's Min. Min. Yes, I do. I'll just take a photo.
It's very small.
This book is, there are so many wonderful things about old Cairo that we didn't put in this book. And like the wedding where if you're going to get married, you come with the families get together and they have to look at each other and stay for overnight and keep looking at each other. Yeah. Well, what do you do if you don't like it? And we did put like the hanging church in here again, but there's some more detail. Oh no, and there's the Jewish section, because and there is the synagogue in Old Cairo, and it's quite beautiful. And let's see here. We had a professor from.
You guys see?
That's really sneaky. Okay. Very sneaky. And we've seen and heard guides take people up to this little spot and say, this is where they found Moses. No. It's not even close to where he was. Okay. But this is inside the synagogue, and if you've never been in there, that's really very nicely done. But that's part of Egyptian history. It is. And there were those that really didn't want me to put that in there, but nor did they want to have the other part. But that's all part of it too. So anyway, I think you should go through this a little bit and take a look. This is under the Church of St. George. Look at how gorgeous that is. That people don't get to go. They don't know it's there, or they don't take the time. And then the Greek Orthodox, he wouldn't let some people in there, He was tough. He was a little cranky. Okay. Any other questions? Just believe and know that what's in your heart and you want to get it done, you can do it. Just keep smiling and keep your heart in a nice, soft place. Yes?
I have a question, please. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing this kind of experience. I talked to the gentlemen here, and they are so interested because that's our history as Egyptians.
It is.
For me, I was born and raised in Egypt. I went to all these places many times. But in the introduction, you just said that you did that because you want to get this experience with the Western Christians. And my question is, do the Western Christians show this kind of interest about this?
Definitely. They're in shock. Well, for one thing, when the Western tourist goes to Egypt, they go... You like to see your hand do this? They go to see the Pharaonic period, and that the religious part of Egypt is so important. But that is at the end of the Pharaonic period, and when the Romans and that sort of thing. Roman history is very important there too, because they built some magnificent things that are still most of it's still standing. Some of the churches. Like in the Luxor Temple, there's a church in there, but it's gradually being taken down. When there was a big fire in the Luxor Temple, it was a church. But the next morning it was a mosque. So there's a lot of history and art in there. I was through there, but see, I know people that will just, oh, come on, let's go, and they take me through. But that's not the usual tourist. You can't do that.
So, as a part, we are here, we're Christians, all us came from Egypt. Do you think that we have a rule that we need to do in America, as Coptic Christian Church in the United States? Is that kind of a rule that we need to do as young men, young people here? We have to do something to spread this?
Well, I think you have to work that out with the priests and be careful that you don't undermine what they feel is correct. I wish that the Texans knew you were here. I have seen when they don't know you're here, and they're now so afraid of what's happening, they don't know who you are, because you're not part of the bad guy. And when I say I was giving a talk here today, they didn't know you were here, and they live near here. I don't know how, you have a festival every year, do you? And you invite people over, but it's not enough. There should be some kind of, I don't know how, you open the door, a church tour of this whole area. There are several churches. Some of them I don't know anything about, but there should be something that would open the eyes and the hearts, inviting another church to come here. The Catholic Church, my goodness, that is just huge. Getting together with them and having a back and forth dialogue. Let them come and see for a mass here, and you go there. Meeting everybody, shaking hands, looking them in the eye. I think that's so important. Because I'm afraid of what we're going for right now with what's happening. And nobody knows who's who. I don't know, but that's how I feel. But you must go through your priests and your committees, and you have to figure that very closely. I've gotten myself into so much trouble by not doing that. I can't tell you. No, yeah. And it's not worth the trouble. But God bless you for bringing it up. Yes?
I want to say thank you very much for coming. It's always an honor to see you. I think that sometimes this generation or the next generation don't realize the deepness and the fullness and the richness of the faith that we have in the history of the church. And they start, because America is so diverse and so many opportunities, they want to go seek other things. They want to explore different things. I wanted to know what's your opinion about that. Since you've been here.
I happen to agree with you, and I think the Western Christian life is being peeled away, or has been peeled away, because we don't put history in front of the children and teach them what's inside the sanctuary. Why do we have 12 columns in a church? Why do we, those kinds of things are extremely important, because that cements that part of faith you have to know about. And it's lovely that Egyptians come together with Egyptians now, but most of the Western Christian faith, the Protestants, the Catholics now, are all intermingled with heritage from other countries mixed together. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it does take away some of the history, doesn't it? But that doesn't mean I think you should not go with other people that aren't Egyptian Copts. But you have to be aware of who you are in order to hold that in your heart. You have the best of the best right now. You really do. And I love you very much for letting me come today. Thank you so much.
Small gift from me. I don't know what to say. We can't thank you enough. There aren't enough words to say thank you. Thank you for inspiring us to go and to learn about our heritage. Thank you for inspiring us to have a journey like you had, and may God continue to bless your journey.
Thank you, Suzette. Thank you very much.
Just a small token of our appreciation.
Oh, a beautiful icon. Oh, this is lovely. Oh. I do. You all think
And we have Miss Ludwig's books, so we'll hopefully be getting more of Old Cairo, but we have several boxes of the churches of Egypt, so I think it'll be very enriching for all of us.
I'll go get my car and bring down. I can't carry those books. You have to come and visit me at my home and see my office. I have icons in the office that are really beautiful. None as lovely as this, but the subject matter is the same. And I have some Egyptian artists out of Cairo that they're contemporary. But someone stopped that. The nuns were painting icons, and they were doing such a beautiful job, and the mother of their group just stopped them, which was too bad because the faith that they just gave everybody, all those icons, and then they made a nice living off of it, I'm sure. But I have some of those too. They're very nice. Little misspelling here and there. That's beautiful. It's just beautiful. A treasure, a true treasure. So I'm going to go to my car and I'll bring back a few more of these books.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. If we can get some of the youth to help Miss Ludwig get some of those books. Those are the green. Yeah.